I've got a book here, Letting Love Win. It's an amazing story of a Pakistani boy came to England and has experienced life in England since, when was it, Mohammed?
I was actually born here.
Were you born here?
Born here, yeah.
I didn't realise that.
Born here. I can't say where because it's obviously not in the book. So.
But how many years before your birth did your parents come to this country?
My parents came here on the invitation of the British for workers to come in and work in the mills. So I would say in the 50s, 1950s.
So they'd been here roughly 10 years before you were born?
Yeah.
10 years. So they'd been established. What sort of community were you born into? Was it a sort of a Pakistani ghetto, or were you just one family amongst an English community?
Where we were at, there was only about 3 or 4 Asian households, and the rest were whites.
Yeah,
so,
English people. Yeah,
English people. Yeah, and because we were few and strangers as well from a different country, we had a lot of racism.
What did the English think of sort of Pakistani families moving into their communities? Did they feel threatened at the time? Do you think they perceived there was a threat ahead?
I don't think that they were threatened. I think that they just didn't like the different culture that was being introduced, and we were known as smelly Pakis. Because of the food that we used to eat.
So there was hostility to you from the off? Yeah,
there was. The hostility was quite brutal. For example, we used to have one family on our street that used to put their own excrement on our front steps. That was quite frequent.
Did your father ever think, maybe we're not welcome here, we should go back to where we came from?
He eventually, going back home to my father was a failure. So the other option he had was to move into a town where there was a large Pakistani community, very large. So there, from the age of 11 is where we went, and that's where I felt a bit more secure.
So you'd have 11 years, your first 11 years growing up, you were exposed to a lot of hostility in England.
Yeah.
And that's a formative period, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's where the seed of hate was planted within the Pakistani community as being anti-British.
Did you feel hatred to the English yourself then?
I did, because I didn't understand at that age. So I didn't feel any hate towards the whites, because at that age I was young. I didn't.
But did you feel a sense of relief when you moved into a Muslim community, into a Pakistani community?
I felt nice to be amongst a community that was of my own. I felt safer.
So from the age of 11 to 16, when you left school, you were just growing up as in a peaceful environment, and you prospered in that environment?
I wouldn't say it was peaceful. I saw a lot of abuse in my own home, and I also saw a lot of racism in schools. We had some modern rockers, and skinheads, and we as Asian pupils bore the brunt of the racism there. I mean, the white kids used to spit in our food and make us eat it. During swimming, they used to hold me down under the water until I was struggling to breathe.
Well, what was the feeling within the Pakistani community? Because you had access to that. Did they feel like this is only temporary, we're going to grow in numbers, and we're going to actually be strong enough to overcome any hostility we face?
That wasn't in the case where my parents were concerned, because the first generation that came here, we had a feeling of fear of being thrown out of Britain. So that lingered on, with my parents. I remember they always used to say, we need to save money in case we get kicked out, things like that. But I think that the younger sort of generation that I grew up with had the seed of hatred was planted in them, and I think it's that seed has now grown into a monster.
But didn't your parents ever feel that, well, we can go back to Pakistan, we want to go back home. Didn't they feel homesick?
No, because going back home meant a tough life. It meant work, it meant money. It was a...
Was Pakistan really that bad that they were prepared to endure anything here?
Yeah, I mean, in Pakistan, unless you are educated and you can read and write, life there is very tough. It's a lot of uneducated people that have either got jobs, and if they have, it's meaningless.
So they stayed here to escape poverty, essentially.
Yeah.
And they saw prosperity here.
Yes, they did.
But what did they feel about the growing Pakistani community? Did they feel they had some sort of mission here? You know, I'm thinking about the Islamic faith. Did they think they had some mission to establish the faith here?
I don't think that was the original way of sort of thinking. I think when my father came here and his counterparts, the whole idea was to earn the money and send it back. Some of them didn't.
Send it back to an extended family in Pakistan,
and some of them wanted to return, but they then sort of decided to stay on because life here was easier. And I think at that time, the Pakistani community was open to a white man to come into their home because it was a new experience for them. And I think instead what they got was a lot of hate towards them, and I think that's when things started to go wrong.
Well, what about politically? I mean, what did they think when they came in? They were given passports, British passports.
Yeah.
Did they feel a great sense of gratitude for having a British passport, or did they expect to get a British passport?
Yeah, they did. I mean, they felt so much gratitude. They always voted for Labour because it was a Labour that they felt that asked them into the country in the first place. So they always had that affiliation and appreciation towards the Labour Party.
But not only a passport, obviously you had free education, you had free healthcare, and obviously there was a growing Pakistani population. You're bringing family members in, extended family were coming over. So did they have a sense that, hey, something's going on here, this is a really privileged environment? In many ways, it was like, did they think that the British were actually a bit soft?
I think as I grew up in Bradford, things I started to notice was that the Pakistani community were more in demanding of what they wanted. You give them an inch and they want to take the whole town. That I saw as I grew up, and that's what I found disturbing. And I think that was passed on to the youngsters, and of course, even though my parents were a bit more placid in their approach, whereas the younger generation of today are more aggressive in their approach.
So they're being empowered, right? And also, obviously, they were receiving a lot, so they must have had, they must have said, well, we're entitled to this now. We've got a British passport, we're British citizens. We're entitled to the access to the welfare state, access to the job market, equality before the law. But this was, in a sense, were the British giving away things which other people weren't essentially entitled to? Did they have any sense that actually we're taking advantage here?
I think, for example, my community was quick to pull strings where they could, whether that meant cheating the DSSS or whether that meant is taking advantage of Article 18 of freedom of religion. It's under that Article 18 that my community pushed their agenda forward, and the whole thing was to have the upper hand on the white man, and that's exactly what they did. And of course the white community, when I say community I mean the authorities, thought, okay, these people are claiming this and they are entitled to it. it didn't cross their minds that the people that are claiming these, whether it's unemployment, they weren't aware that they were actually working as well. That it was a deliberate attempt to.
So they were seeking to take advantage. Obviously,
yeah.
That's human nature, isn't it? But then it goes a step further. So they started building mosques in this country. Can you remember when your community built its first mosque?
When I was in Bradford, for example, at that time there was probably about 3 or 10. Now, when I go to Bradford to visit, or whether it's Leeds or Huddersfield, certainly in Bradford there's about 80 now.
Yeah, easy.
And it's still expanding. And I think the whole agenda now of the Pakistani community is to have a mosque almost on every street corner, as you do with the churches, because they want to mark their territory there. And the whole agenda now of the Pakistani community is not to work here and send the money back, is to turn this sort of country into a Islamic state.
So they become colonies, you're saying? They become expanding colonies. They become microcosms of Pakistani life. And then they started to grow. And so in a sense they become expanding colonies. They become like sort of alien settlements within England. Was there a feeling in the Pakistani community at the time that we are creating something new here, that we're creating a new world, that our power is expanding in this society? And did they feel that they were taking something from the British, or did they feel like a sort of that they could coexist with the British and that this was going to be okay?
My community's agenda was never to coexist with the whites. Because we saw the whites as filthy eating pigs and women as women that dressed in short skirts that slept around. Yeah. So we were never intending to integrate. We wanted to create our own world, our own community. I think what has happened now is that these communities are now gradually starting to become a country within a country. And I think the most powerful tool that my community is using is the racist card and Islamophobic card and PC. I think those are the 3 main tools that they are using.
But they could have used them right from the off, couldn't they? Ab initio, like claiming a victim status, they call it. We're victims, and so we're entitled to special privileges. But like when I was growing up in the 1960s, in a working class community in England, families were still together. People still got married. There was a church on the corner of the street which the kids went to. It was still, for me, it was still a wholesome society, England then. I mean, the working class started to unravel in the 1970s, and sort of they lost this Christian culture and these sort of wholesome values. We had the legalisation of abortion in 1967. We had the legalisation of homosexuality in 1967. Easy divorce. Things started to unravel. But that sort of picture of English society you portrayed there, that the Pakistanis saw us as somehow degenerate and somehow immoral, that wasn't the England I was growing up in the 1960s. And did the Pakistanis respect Christian culture?
At that time they did to an extent, but what we saw of the white community is when the Pakistanis interacted with the whites. When I say with the whites, I mean the races, the skinheads. Yeah. So this is what we saw, the white community, and we didn't want to be a part of that. A part of a white community that went out drinking and getting drunk. And yet.
And see alcohol be a very big division.
Yeah, but interesting thing is, what the Pakistani community has accused the whites of, are now my Pakistani community have become that very thing. a lot of the Muslims, go out drinking, boozing and sleeping around with girls, drugs, drug dealing, all sorts. So the very thing that my community used to accuse the whites of, they're doing exactly the same now.
You're saying they've been corrupted?
Everybody has the responsibility of their own actions. They can't blame the whites of corrupting them.
But there's corruption going on.
They're the ones who chose to be like that. So in other words, they are just hypocrites. They accuse the whites of stereotyping us, and yet it's us that stereotype the whites all the time. And I think that borders on the line of being a racist towards the whites.
It's interesting because now in the white community, because we've seen the English community, we've seen the falling away of church attendance, we've seen the loss of traditional moral values. And we often look at the Muslim community, we see on Friday they go to prayers, they still have big families, they seem to hold together their families, they have lots of children. And we look at them and we don't see them as, we know there's hypocrisy, we know that certain Muslims will drink in that, but they still hold on to sort of fundamental values, traditional Islamic values. In a sense, that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of fear of the Muslim community in this society, because they've held on to something that we've lost.
I don't totally agree on that, because at the end of the day, Islam is for men, right? Islam is built on pleasing the men, so men can do anything that they want, but the women can't. So what I experienced as I grew up in my community was that yes, people went on Friday prayers, yes, they fasted, and yet they were still swearing and cursing and doing all sorts. So it's just an outward appearance that they show. But what I found strange and disturbing is that if Allah is so important to them, if Mohammed is so important to them, if Islam is so important to them, then how come they have this wretched hearts and yet outwardly they want to do all these wonderful things? So it's not all hunky-dory. The whites.
We see like Islam is massively taking ground in this society. The Muslim population is exploding in every city. I mean, you can talk about London, you can talk about Birmingham, Manchester, Bradford, Luton, Blackburn, anywhere in Britain. The Muslim population is exploding. We see them accumulating power in this society rapidly. Now it's reaching a tipping point where it's gone from a minority empowering itself to a group which is actually taking power over the whole of society. Think of like Sadiq Khan in London, he's the mayor there, he has political power, he's shaping the future of London society, and because he's a committed Muslim, it's in an Islamic model. And we see this so Islam has inherent strengths. If it's growing so rapidly, it must have inherent strengths. And it's interesting that you focused on women there before and the centrality of women in Islam controlling their women. Because when I asked a Muslim, why was he so contemptuous of English society? He said to me, because you let your women run wild. He said, you even let your women go with foreigners. He said, we would not allow that in our society. They regard their women as somehow a precious commodity which they have to control. And it seems to have given them real strength. I mean, can you see how weak England has become because it's lost its traditional values?
I can see where England, the UK as a whole, where it has become weak. It has turned away from its Christian principles as a whole. And when you turn away from Christian principles and want to go your own way, you then leave a void. And when that happens, you've got another ideology. Well, you have an ideology that wants to come in and take over forcefully. Now, Islam may seem strong, but Islam also has a weak point. It's also weak, and its weakest point is the apostasy of Islam. People who turn away from Islam. There are thousands in the UK that have turned away from Islam and are having to go into hiding, away from their communities, as I have done. Otherwise, we would be attacked or even killed. And yet there are thousands upon thousands that want to leave Islam but are too afraid to, because they tend to lose everything: their homes, their kids, their community, everything.
They get disconnected from the networks.
Absolutely.
When you were 16, you left school, right? And it was still, when you left school at the age of 16, the Muslims were still a small minority in Britain. So you had to go out into the wider world. You had to interact with English people. And how did you find that, moving in English culture, maybe joining firms or joining the military? How did you find that experience?
When I grew up, in the town I was, the community into which I was in, it was huge, even at that time. So I wasn't really forced to go out and to look elsewhere. I saw what was happening in my own community. I saw what Islam was, and being a critical thinker, I eventually rejected Islam. And I knew that in order to be who I am, freely, without being attacked or persecuted, I had to move out a community into which I was born into and live with the whites in order to be safe.
So you found Islam an oppressive ideology? You didn't feel comfortable with it?
I found it a dangerous, forceful ideology. I didn't see a God that cared. I didn't see a God that loved me. I didn't see a God that I could personally connect with. I saw a God that would be angry, that would be vengeful, that would strike at me if I did anything wrong. There wasn't that personal connection there. It was a God, a Allah, that I had to worship, but I could not have a personal attachment with.
So you separated yourself from Islam and you went searching for personal freedom, personal fulfillment. What did you find on that search?
I went searching for God as well.
Searching for God, yeah.
Yeah, and when I first came across Christians, I was quite taken aback, because the Christians, as we saw them, Christians who slept around, Christians who did all sorts, and yet when I came across practicing Christians, I saw the love, I saw compassion, I saw Christians who actually control their tongues. I never heard them swear or curse anyone. And I remember looking back when I was 12 years old, I saw a film about Jesus on TV. At that time I just saw him as a prophet, but his behaviour struck me. You know, he was a caring, loving person, a person that had the power to heal and do all sorts. And yet when I came across Christians, I saw the same attributes in Christians, that same love. And at that time I knew that I must have hit the right chord. And I remember from there on I wanted to call myself a Christian. That's when I ditched my Islamic identity, because even though I did not believe in Islam, it still was an identity, a part of me, because it was my identity.
Your heritage, so
Islam is not just an ideology, it's an identity, it's culture, it's everything.
So in Christianity you saw the fruits of the Spirit. You saw people who had genuine love, you saw people who had joy in their heart, and you saw people who were walking in peace, and you thought, that's a community I want to be part of.
Yes.
How easy was it to get involved with the Christian community?
Very easy. I mean, they are quite open and they are quite loving.
What did you actually do to make that step? You just walked into a church, or did you meet Christians?
I actually ended up in a hostel, in a Christian hostel. That's when I first came across Christians for the first time, and it was there that I saw, practicing Christians, because Christians to me, in my own community, as I said, was anybody who was a white-skinned
Yeah.
is a Christian.
It was a European identity.
Yeah, so even though Christianity started in the East as did Islam, the Muslim community still has it in its way of thinking that Christianity is somehow a white Western religion.
So when you went back home back into the Pakistani community, and you said, "Look, I'm exploring the Christian faith, and it's touching my soul, and I feel drawn to it." What was the response within your community to that?
I didn't do that. I think it was about 15 years later that I phoned up my home where.
Were they curious about what you'd done in that previous 15 years?
No, because I actually broken up all ties, with my community and my family for other reasons.
Family reasons.
Yeah, and so forth. But 15 years later, I think it was, I phoned up my parents' house, hoping that my sister would answer, and she did on this occasion. And they were pleased to hear from me. My brothers, came onto the phone, really pleased to hear from me. Really happy, joyful. And me, in my excitement, I wanted to share with them what a changed person I was, from a person that wanted to kill my mother and 23 others.
Bitter and angry person.
Yeah, hateful and revenge. Because that's the whole agenda I had. I had 23 people on a list that I wanted to kill, and one of them was my mother. And I just wanted to share with them that this transformation of my heart, how it happened, that I now forgive my mother. So I just wanted to share that joy that I'm a changed person, that I was a better person.
It's interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that, because I once interviewed another guy called Mohammed who come from Iran, and I asked him what was the big difference. He had become a Christian from being a Muslim to being a Christian, and he said when he was a Muslim, he had so much pride. If anyone irritated him or he felt insulted by anybody, he wanted revenge against them. He felt it was his duty almost to punish people who'd somehow sort of infringed his pride. And he said once he became a Christian, he learned to let things go. He learned that was the peace of Christ that came into his heart. He learned to forgive people, and he said that was the seminal difference.
Yeah, I think where I was concerned, my anger and hate and revenge was justified, especially watching my mother. My mum hated having daughters, and she used to brutalise them, especially the handicapped one, keeping her in the cellar and beating her up almost every single day. I saw the blood spouting from her nose, from her mouth, from her head on a daily basis almost, and so my hate towards my mum was, I can't explain the hate, it was more than hate. There were occasions that I literally wanted to go into the kitchen and grab hold of a knife and just stab her away, just torture her. And when she had an affair, for example, she had an affair with another Asian guy, and that really boiled my hate even more, and so forth, and all the white kids that I wanted to kill as well. So I had this list of 23 people. And when I became a follower of Christ, and that hate is taken away from you, and you are challenged by your behaviour on treating others, even to the extent of loving your enemies. It struck me, and it challenged me, and I wanted to be like Christ. And it's only by knowing Christ and his character that you are actually become absorbed in his character to a point that it actually changes you. It washes your heart with his character rather than your own human nature of hate. And so I wanted to share that with my brothers, and I was so excited. This is me. This is a new me. Look at me. So I said to them, I'm a Christian. And instantly their behaviour changed. They said, you traitor, and the anger, the resentment, from switching from one to the other, just like that, it was incredible. And they didn't want to speak to me. And my sister still spoke to me on the phone because I was a hero. I used to stop my mum from beating her up. So she saw me as a hero, and that was a reaction I got. Looking at it now, what I should have done is establish that relationship with them first before I told them. But I was too excited. I wanted for them to know they knew me.
So I can see how you moved away from this anger, justifiable anger in the face of evil, to deciding that love is the best policy, that love never fails, love your enemy, love those who hate you, bless those who curse you, and that transforms a situation, transforms your heart, and can soften things. It can make people a much more pleasant society to live in. Now, but did you actually go through was it really a bed of roses becoming a Christian, or did you see weaknesses within the Christian church itself? Did you suffer any disillusionment in Christianity?
Yeah, I mean, people are people. Christians are not angels. We are not perfect. We've got faults. We stumble, but we also have a conscience that when we stumble and make an error, and we are quick to say, "I'm sorry," and we forgive, and we move on. And yes, I saw a lot of Christians in the churches who let me down, and I'm sure that I let other Christians down. But if there were bad things happening within the Christian community, I always have this argument that when people say, "Yeah, but what about the KKK?" who carry the crosses and so forth, and what about so these Christians? And I thankfully I was immature in my faith, that I did not come to the point and say, stuff's Christianity, if this is what Christians are. I always looked at what Jesus taught, not what Christians behaved like.
You kept your eyes upon Jesus.
Yeah,
and because of that, you persevered, and you persevered now.
Yeah.
How do you see go on.
Whereas in my Pakistani community that I was born into, there's Islam, the bad behaviour or the Muslims, I can look at what Mohammed did, what he taught, what was his character, and it is no wonder that these people are as they are, because they just carry on as if everything's okay, hunky-dory, that they can do all these bad things, and if they do one good sort of a deed of the day, then Allah will be happy. But with Christians, practicing Christians, if I stumble, if I make a mistake, for example, if I'm in a car and somebody cuts in front of me, almost causing me an accident, and I swear at them, I am quick to say, "Oops, that was wrong. God, I'm sorry." But with the Muslims, there's not that conscience. They just carry on as if it's okay, it's normal.
Now, we've reached a situation, as I talked earlier, Islam's expanded rapidly in this society. What do you see for the prospects for Christians in the future in Britain?
I think we are heading towards troubled times. I think what will happen in probably 10 to 20 years' time is that it is likely that Christians would be persecuted to the point that they will be too afraid to overtly share their faith. I think we will come to the point where we will see two communities at head-to-head with each other, as we've seen in the Irish Troubles, meaning that the Islamic communities and the racist white, and I mean the real racist whites, will start planting explosives on each other tit for tat, and I think that will happen eventually. 10 to 20 years time, I don't know.
So you see it as a struggle for who will be in charge in this country?
I think, yeah.
Now Islam's not going to back down, is it?
Islam is not going to, but I believe Islam will get a good hiding, because I don't want that. As a practicing Christian, I do not advocate this type of reaction. I believe in love, and I believe in is loving even your enemies that want to kill you, as Jesus taught. Love your enemies, pray for them, and that doesn't mean, as a Christian, that I should stand by and allow people to attack me.
Where is the spirit of resistance going to come from? Because if they've given up so much ground already, what is going to stop them giving up ground and come fight back?
I think at the moment people have got a lot to lose in sort of terms of jobs, in terms of mortgages and so forth.
We're still in our comfort zone.
We still are in our comfort zone, and we don't see. I think a lot of us do see the threat, and we do feel a need to do something, but that won't come. That will only come when this country goes through the worst recession in history, when we got high unemployment. That's when it'll start to kick off.
What if the Muslims get enough power that they start to impose Sharia law?
I think that will happen by stealth, and I think it is gradually happening by stealth, because what will happen again in 10 to 20 years time is people like yourself or anyone, for example, in the streets of Bradford, in the streets of Luton, Halifax, wherever there is wherever there's a large Islamic community, I believe what's going to happen is that, say for example, a police officer sees a couple of people holding hands walking down the streets of Luton or Bradford or Halifax, whether it's holding hands or a can in their hands, whether it's smoking, whatever it is, a police officer would approach you and say, you can't do that. This is an Islamic area, it will offend them. That will happen by stealth, and I think gradually it will get more sort of ground.
But you know, with Sharia law, that non-Muslims are given a different status. They're given a dhimmi status. They have no legal rights under Sharia law, only what the Muslims actually allow them to have. Now, the English people are not aware of the consequences of that they will be totally disempowered. They will lose their political representation, they will lose any ability to change the law or to influence the law, and they will actually be living at the whim of the Muslim authorities.
I think,
in a sense, it's a second-class status, isn't it? This is what has happened in previous Muslim takeovers of Christian societies.
I think certain aspects of that law will eventually, come into force. But when you're speaking about the penal code of it, for example, stoning and chopping off hands, I can't see that happening in the West. I can't.
Yeah, but you know the process of dawah, whereby a non-Muslim society is Islamicized over time. The culture has changed, the laws have changed, and eventually the whole religion of the society has changed, and it becomes totally Muslim, because the Islamic goal is total control. Is that why the English will have to resist at some stage? They're actually given a choice: either resist, submit, or leave.
I think it will happen long before it comes to that stage. I think the true nature of Islam would be so obvious that people will start to resist. And I think that will only happen, as I said, when people haven't got anything to lose. And I mean, for example, for the penal code of Sharia law to actually happen, for example, stoning, adultery, and chopping off heads, things like that, I think the whole of the UK would have to be 100% Islamic, and I can't see that happening. I think I honestly cannot see that happening. I think
what I would say, Mo, in conclusion now, just to finish, is that the future is unwritten, but what we know is that the future is very uncertain for the English in their own country. Mo, you've talked about getting organised politically. Is there a particular party that you're actually thinking of there?
I have actually joined the first ever party, and that party is for Britain. It's the only party that wants to deal with the real issues, not just Islam, but also animal rights and other issues as well. So it's not just focused on one thing. It's focused on a broader spectrum of issues that concerns everyone, and just ask people to have a look at the party on the website.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Mo. That was really informative. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. There's a notification bell as well, if you can touch that as well, and any donations to support this channel will be gladly received. This is Mo's book, Letting Love Win. If you want a signed copy of this book, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you.